Hi guys, so today I'll be talking about how the Britain were able to colonize Egypt and why they actually colonized Egypt and how they were actually successful in colonizing Egypt. So guys, stay with me as we unfold this history. It all started in 1798 when Napoleon Bonaparte led a French voyage to Egypt. And the reason why Napoleon Bonaparte led French voyage to Egypt was because they wanted to weaken Britain by cutting off its trade routes to India, And they also wanted to establish French influence in the Eastern Mediterranean. So in the year 1798, the French defeated the Mamluks at the Battle of the Pyramid. Mamluk is an Arabic word which means owned or slaves. So you can also call them slave soldiers. Even after the French was able to defeat the Mamluks, that is the slave soldiers in Egypt, and take over Egypt, they were only able to control Egypt for just 3 years. Britain and France were the two most powerful European nations. So they were always competing for control of colonies, trade routes, and naval dominance. So Britain's greatest overseas possession at that time was India, which brought huge wealth through trade, textiles, spices, etc. So Britain were actually getting wealthier from trading from India, and their colonies were expanding, and France thought to themselves how they were going to be able to weaken Britain. Yes. And so Napoleon Bonaparte came up with a strategy in 1798. He knew he could not invade Britain directly because Britain's navy was very strong. And so he thought to himself, if I can't attack Britain at home, I will attack what makes them rich. That was Britain colonies and trade routes. And so Egypt was the perfect spot because it connected the Mediterranean to the Red Sea and then to India through the old caravan route before the Suez Canal existed. So controlling Egypt meant France could threaten Britain's shortest route to India. Yes, that was a very short route from Britain, that is the European country, to India for trade. Because on the norms, if they were to follow another route, they would have to follow along African coast. Yes, they have to pass along, sail, because it's on the water, it's on the river actually. They have to sail along African coast. Yes, and that route was actually long. So for France to, control Egypt, it means that they would actually threaten Britain's shortest route to India. And we should also forget that Indians were the one financing Britain colony at the time. So weakening Britain's trade meant weakening Britain's global power. I hope you're following. Later on in 1799, the British Navy under Admiral Nelson defeated the French fleet at the Battle of the Nile. They defeated the French, they defeated Napoleon Bonaparte, and they actually destroyed the French fleet. Napoleon Bonaparte later left Egypt in 1799, and the French eventually surrendered to a joint British-Ottoman force in 1801. So now we know the French only lasted 3 years in Egypt before British actually kicked them out. Later in the year 1882, Britain invaded and occupied Egypt after the Arabi revolt, mainly to protect its control over the Suez Canal, which was actually vital for trade and access to India. So I know you are thinking in your mind, what is the Suez Canal? So the Suez Canal is the man-made waterway in Egypt, which connected the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. It was French that actually supervised and built the Suez Canal. So now I know you're wondering how and why was Britain now in control of the Suez Canal. So stay with me, guys. So the benefit of the Suez Canal was that it actually allowed ships to travel from European to Asia without having to go around Africa through the Cape of Good Hope, that is South Africa, modern day South Africa. And this Suez Canal was actually shorter route than the old caravan road that the Britain usually take before they would pass through the Mediterranean, then through Egypt, and then to the Red Sea. But this time around, they didn't have to pass Egypt through the old caravan road. All they just have to do is just sail from Europe down to Asia. Less stress. So the Suez Canal actually makes trade much faster and cheaper. Like I said earlier, the Suez Canal was actually planned and constructed by French engineer Ferdinand de Lesseps. I can't pronounce his name well. So it was actually planned and constructed by French engineer Ferdinand and built under the rule of Khedive Said of Egypt. And the Suez Canal was actually completed under the reign of Khedive Ismail. They started constructing the Suez Canal in the year 1859 and finished in the year 1869. That was a total of 10 years for the French engineer to be able to construct the Suez Canal. So the project actually puts Egypt into heavy debt as the ruling Khedive borrowed massively to finance modernization. So in the year 1875, Britain bought Egypt's shares in the Suez Canal from the nearly bankrupt Khedive. So this actually allowed Britain to gain partial control of the Suez Canal. This later brings us back to 1882, the Arabi revolt, that is after nationalist uprising. Britain invaded and occupied Egypt, overshadowing French influence. France still held its cultural and economic ties, but Britain became the colonial power. So now we know that it was after the construction of the Suez Canal, Britain they bought shares from the Egypt Suez Canal, yes, and then they used style and militarily, occupied Egypt in 1882. So the Suez Canal actually made Egypt a strategic location for global trade. And the main reason Britain colonized Egypt was so they can control the Suez Canal and to protect its route to India. Do not forget that also. Even up to date, like up to today, the Suez Canal is one of the world's busiest shipping routes, handling about 12% of global trade. So guys, the actual reason why Britain bought Egypt's shares of the Suez Canal was because that route was shorter, like it was shorter than the former route they were usually taking. Yes. So the Suez Canal, like I said earlier, it linked the Mediterranean Sea, Europe to Asia. Like they don't have to pass through deserts or anything. Before the Suez Canal was actually built, the way they transport their goods was that from Europe they would pass through the Mediterranean Sea and then to Egypt. Then camels will not be the one to carry this good to the Red Sea. After which they will not load it again inside another ship again that will not take the goods to India. So you see it was long. And you see that Suez Canal, what they did was that they would just load from Europe, pass through the Mediterranean Sea, pass through the Suez Canal, and then they've gotten to Asia, India precisely. So it was shorter for them and faster. On the norms, if they were to take, and another route they had again was actually along the Cape of Good Hope. They would sail from Europe down to South Atlantic Ocean, then across, or should I say along the Cape of Good Hope, before they will not sail again or down to Asia. So journeying through that route actually take 4 to 6 months. So it was long. While these more expensive goods, they would usually follow the old caravan road that was from Europe, then sail through the Mediterranean Sea, then reach Egypt, get camels, load camels to load the goods, take it down to the Red Sea, then get another ship and sail down to Asia. That was the old caravan route. That was if they were to, transport expensive small goods, like small expensive goods. While you see those big ones, they'll have to sail around the African coast along the Cape of Good Hope. So you see why the Britain were happy at the construction of the Suez Canal and why they grabbed the opportunity of buying shares from Egypt. Sometimes I usually wonder to myself that, what if French hadn't tried to, weaken Britain's trade routes? What if French hadn't tried to block Britain's trade route? That was the old caravan road. What if they hadn't tried to block the route? What if they just left Britain to continue trading and, expanding its colonies? Would Britain have had the thought of colonizing Egypt in the first place? So when I asked myself that question, I thought to myself, had it been France had just left Britain to continue trading with India and they hadn't tried to, block Britain's trade routes, would Britain have colonized Egypt like the way they actually later colonized Egypt in 1882? And I discovered, I figured that maybe they wouldn't have colonized Egypt earlier in 1882. Maybe it would have just been later. But eventually, Britain would have surely colonized Egypt. Yes, I know you're thinking maybe they wouldn't have colonized Egypt. Actually, Britain would have eventually colonized Egypt. But it was just that the French, the French made the colonization faster. Yes, they made it faster for Britain. I mean, they had just left it like that. Britain would have eventually colonized Egypt, but it would have been later on, but not in 1882. So France actually forced Britain and Britain was just trying to protect its colony, that was India, and protect its trade routes, and that was why they decided that they would colonize Egypt. So guys, that is all you need to know about how Britain colonized Egypt and why they actually colonized Egypt. So in my next video, guys, I'll be discussing everything Britain did to Egypt, both the bad and good. I'll be discussing about it. So stay tuned. My name is Deborah, your favorite historian. Please like and follow me for more videos. Bye guys.